Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Ercole Iaconie in the 5-minute pool on ICC. Let's play knight f6 in this one. This is an opponent I've had in the past. I'm going to go c5. I actually have a strange idea to play a Benoni this game, but he's not going to let me. He's playing knight f3 instead of going d5. I was ready to play a Benoni. The Benoni is just an opening I haven't played yet on this channel, and I don't know, it's a fun opening. I have way more experience in it from the white side, but I was going to give it a go. So this move a6 on move 4 after the capture on d4 is not popular, but I think it's a good move for blitz. I don't think it's completely sound OTB, but for blitz it's entirely playable. So bishop d2, I think stronger might have been knight b3, because now I can take and play e5. And this will force the queens off the board. And it depends where his knight goes, but almost certainly after the queen trade, I will play f6.
Check.
To blunt the diagonal for his bishop. I want this bishop to be biting on a solid row of 3 pawns. And from here, black usually puts this bishop on e6. I can gain a tempo on the pawn on a2 by doing so. And it's a little unclear where I will develop this knight. Probably to c6, especially if he's fianchettoing this bishop. An alternate plan is to try to stick my own bishop on this long diagonal. So I could play, for instance, bishop d7, bishop g2, bishop c6. So that would be interesting. Let's think, though. If bishop e6, bishop g2, I can take this pawn safely. So I doubt he does that. So let's say bishop e6 and a3. Knight c6, bishop g2. I could always play bishop e7. Yeah, let's do that. I'm always a little unsure where I want that bishop. b5 was another possibility if I wanted to go bishop b7. But I like the aspect of winning a tempo with this move. Maybe I send the knight to d7 to c, and then on to c5, where it has the option of going to a4, hitting the bishop and attacking b2. That looks interesting, so let's give it a shot. Because on c6, the knight is kind of restricted. It does jam the diagonal, so he can't get at my pawn on b7 so easily. But this is a more enterprising route for the knight. Has more potential from the c5 square versus c6. Okay, so he's making a prophylactic move. Just eyeing the b3 square. Also opening the bishop. It's probably not a purely prophylactic move. How about rook c8 now? That way I get the rook out of the line of fire. And b4 I can play knight a4, so that's no big deal. Yeah, let's do rook c8. Rook d8 also makes sense. I think I slightly prefer rook c8, so let's do that move instead. If the knights get traded, it's very likely the game will be close to equal. So let's say bishop e7, knight e4, for instance. Trade, trade. Yeah, it'll be close to equal. If b5, I can still play knight e4. Let's play bishop e7. I'll stick my king on f7 most likely. I probably will not castle. I'd like to keep my king centralized because we're in a queenless middle game, getting close to a pure endgame. Okay, so bishop b4. He's threatening to take and then win this pawn on b7. b5 would be natural. So let's do it. I'm curious if he'll take on c5 or not. If he takes on c5, I'll take with my bishop. And then if knight e4, I like the look of king e7 when I have a marginal advantage in the endgame. Okay, so let's park the king here. This is another aspect of playing f6 way back on move 10, as I gain a nice square for my king to come into without having to castle. He, on the other hand, pretty much had to castle to coordinate his rooks, whereas mine coordinate nicely because I could slide into that square. He didn't really have f3 available, by contrast. Okay, so if I take, is he just going to take and allow me to double isolate his pawns? Or is he actually going to play bishop takes e7 first? Guess we'll find out. He's going to let me double isolate them. But I see his point. He gains an attack on the a6 pawn. Hmm. Well, I probably should capture. So let's do that. And I'm thinking maybe rook c4. Rook c4, rook takes, pawn takes, rook a1, rook b8, rook takes a6, rook takes b4. Looks good. Let's do that. I'm down a full minute, so I'd like to play faster. If bishop b7, also I have rook b8. I'm not worried about losing the h7 pawn if I move my rook, because if bishop takes h7, I always might have the option of playing g6 to trap him. Now, if he takes, I also have the option of f5 too. That's interesting. Maybe f5 is a good move to throw in. Restricts his bishop. Yeah, let's do that. Let's play f5 prior to taking this pawn. Because if I just took it straight away, he could check me, and my king doesn't have a good square either. Now, after, let's say he plays bishop g2 and I take on b4, and then he checks me, I can just slide up to f6 nicely. And then if rook a6, threatening bishop d5, e4 is one move to keep him bottled up. I think this is an important point, f5, if I plan on trying to win this endgame. Yeah, I like my position.
Check.
The proximity of my king to the center. He's going to play bishop b7 or rook b7. Okay, that changes things. But I still have rook d8 or rook a8. Rook a8, he might have rook f7. Let's go here. I miss this idea of trying to interpose on b7. That's a nice one. But still I get good play. Maybe he should have played bishop b7. Still I would have had rook d8. We'll look at that after the game. So now I can get down to d2 and try to win this pawn. It actually depends where he puts his bishop. I mean, if bishop f1, then rook d1 becomes enticing. He has to block with his bishop, and then maybe f4, threatening bishop h3. Yeah, he has to be careful now. Where does he put his bishop? He pretty much has to go back to g2, actually. Oh, maybe not. Okay. Making a lot of bad assumptions this game. Okay. Let's hope that my c-pawn is better than his b-pawn. I think it will be. Although at this point, given that I've missed a couple things, I should probably stop saying I think. All right. Yeah, because now I can run my c-pawn, and I'll always be threatening to promote with check. Also, I have my rook in a good position to stop the pawn. Okay, what's up with this? This just looks really strong for me. He has big problems finding a good square for his bishop. Big problems. Okay, c2, he will play king g2. So I could throw in bishop d5 first. c2, king g2, bishop b3, b6. All right, I feel like I should be winning right here, but I don't see it quite yet. All right, nevertheless, I have to go. Have to go for it. So b6 is like the only try.
Check.
Let's do this. And if f3, I'll play e4 and try to cramp them. I might need the help of my king now, really, to get up there. Maybe. This is getting strange. He doesn't have much time left. The position's much trickier for him. My pawn is one step closer to promoting. He's got to move now. He doesn't have any time.
Check.
Okay, this should lose. Because now I can take on b6. Rook f7 is no longer a threat. Let's just go here.
Time warning.
Let's go here, and then if bishop b3, I have rook a3. Yeah, he lost some time. But I think the position's losing. Bishop b3, rook a3, rook f7 does nothing. So he'd have to play like rook c3 or something, and then I can take on b3 and promote. Let's go back and have a look. So d4, knight f6, c4, c5. Yeah, and he played knight f3, so knight f3 is a decent move here to try to avoid theory. I mean, this move cannot be a bad move, but most people will tell you that black has a couple different ways to equalize. So take and take. e6, I think, is probably most common in this position. I played a6. This is just an idea I picked up many years ago, actually from the games of an international master named Mike Valvo, who was pretty prominent in Midwest chess. He used to play some tournaments here in Minnesota. And he was also involved in early computer chess, by the way. And it's interesting because the point is black wants to go d5, but d5 immediately is not good because of pawn takes. And then if queen takes, knight c3 is just winning a tempo, so knight takes. And then I think knight b5 is an issue, whereupon white is threatening this. And it's like a moderate initiative for white. Black has to be careful. Computer doesn't seem to think it's that big of a deal. Maybe there's something else wrong with d5. C takes, knight takes, maybe just e4. At any rate, d5 immediately I don't think is as desirable as first covering the b5 square. So that's why I played a6. Knight c3 and d5. C takes, knight takes. Yeah, right here, I think white should withdraw the knight. And I suggested knight b3. I see the engine likes knight f3, but I have faced knight b3 before. And then after knight takes c3, queen takes d8, check. King takes, and then pawn takes. Apparently the computer thinks this is about equal. I've actually struggled on the black side of this position before because this bishop, the light square bishop for white, can be developed to g2 where it bears down on b7. And the knight on b3 is a nice advantage in this structure because it can come to a5 a lot of times. So, and black's king is caught in the center still. I have to be careful about his dark square bishop making an annoying move and like cutting off my king. For instance, I can't come to c7 so easily because he has bishop f4. So black has to take care. I think that's a little bit stronger. Yeah, the computer disagrees, but... So back here, take, played bishop d2, I took, and then played e5. Now, e5 right away is interesting too. I wonder what black gains by doing this. Maybe not so much. Knight takes c3, bishop takes c3, e5. So he moves the knight, and then we get to swap the queens. Yeah, I think black is very comfortable in this setup because these pawns are useful in blocking the dark square bishop. It provides a nice square for the light square bishop to come to e6. It doesn't have to worry about being harassed by knight g5. And the king can come to f7. So everything sort of fits together pretty well for black. He played g3. I went bishop e6, a3, so I caused him to lose a tempo. So the engine wants knight c6, bishop g2, bishop e7, something like this. Yeah, black often has a dilemma in this line where to put the knight. And I chose d7 in this because I thought this looked more interesting. Bishop g2, knight c5. The idea of knight a4. So he went knight d2, I played rook c8. Looks like we're playing decent moves here. I was expecting him to play knight e4. I thought he'd want to neutralize my knight and offer a trade for his own knight. He surprised me, though, with the bishop b4 move. It doesn't look like a good idea. Yeah, I think bishop a5 or knight e4. He really probably missed the boat for knight e4 on the last move. It would have been preferable here. So, bishop e7 here, b5, and now king f7. And as I described, it's nice for me that I can play king f7 and connect my rooks, whereas he didn't have that luxury. He had to castle to connect his rooks. Otherwise, they weren't going to be connected for the foreseeable future. And of course, he's not going to play f3 and block his bishop. So e3 would probably allow some knight d3 stuff. It just kind of weakens the light squares around his king. So he's not going to do that. So b5, rook c1, king f7. I felt very good at this point. I did have some moderate troubles on the clock, though. Let's see what it thinks about rook c4. Because I think that point about him having rook takes a6, rook takes b4, or sorry, f5 first, check. Rook a7 check, king here, and maybe bishop e7. I didn't see this, either bishop b7 or rook b7. I'm fortunate that I have counterplay after rook d8, seeking a new horizon for the rook, and he still has vulnerable pawns down there, but it's unfortunate I didn't see it. It's that's an oversight on my part. So rook a6, because if I take this pawn right away on b4, check. I thought he would just check, and if I want to escape the checks, I have to get my king over to like d6, for instance, and I might be dropping the g7 pawn, maybe the h7 pawn. It's messier. Or maybe he could just keep checking me. He could even give me a check on a6 when my king hits d6, and e6 is loose, so my king might not want to wander too far. So fortunately, f5 appears to be good, even in the event of him blocking on b7 check with the rook or the bishop. Rook b7, rook d8, bishop c6, went down to d2. You might be wondering why I didn't play rook check. d1, seemingly getting the rook over with tempo. And the answer is I wanted his king on the back rank for tactical reasons. I think it's better to have him on g1 than forcing him to g2. So I took here. For instance, if ever he drops the bishop back and I give a check on b1 at that point, he plays bishop f1. An idea I described during the game is f4, trying to play bishop h3 and double attack a bishop that could be there. So also, I didn't, keeping his king on g1 makes it less likely it can come up to f3 and become active. So rook c7, I took on b2. He played b5, I played c3, c2. And now king g2 is forced. Otherwise, I get rook b1 check-in, followed immediately by c1 queen, and he'll lose. Okay, so where was my win right now? Computer showing -7. I played bishop b3. Didn't do me any favors. It says just check on d5 immediately, f3, and then e4. So I kind of had the idea right. This threatens to take, and then after he recaptures with the e-pawn, I can promote with discover to check on his king. So let's say he plays f4, e3 check, king h3. Otherwise, if he goes to the back rank, I have rook b1 check, followed by promotion. So king here. And then, yeah, bishop e4 is probably the simplest, threatening rook b1, now that the bishop defends a pawn. But I see the engine was also suggesting this beautiful move, bishop f3. Attacking e2, and if he takes, I gain another passer, and that second passer is decisive. He can't deal with two passed pawns on the second rank. That's a very exquisite line. Zero chance I find that in a blitz game. The point about bishop e4 being possible, though, when my pawn reaches e3, that was something I maybe should have seen. Because in the game, when I played bishop b3, which is kind of a wasted move, because as soon as he plays b6, I have to move my bishop again. Point being that rook b1 allows b7, and queening would just lose the game for me. Or, it would lose the game if I, after rook takes c1, took back, as he gets to promote. I'd have to bail out with bishop d5 check and then go take his pawn. So that's why bishop b3 was a waste of time, because at this point, after he advances b6, I just have to withdraw the bishop anyways, so my rook can prevent the advance of the pawn further. Okay, but it looks like e4 is very similar, even though I've lost a tempo. His pawn is on b6 compared to b5. But if he did this, for instance, it could be the same thing. e3 check, king here. I wonder if bishop e4 works again. It probably does. It's a little closer now, maybe. Bishop a4, so that if rook b1 take, it's probably still winning, though. Yeah, g5, creating threats against his king. Let's say he takes, and plays b7. I can take with a rook. Okay, because if he takes my rook, I queen immediately on c1. So he has trouble. Yeah, he might be in zugzwang. almost is in Zugzwang. Interesting. So instead, he played the capture, but that just accelerates my idea. And I took on b6. I guess I could play rook b1. Even easier. Yeah, rook b1 threatening to promote. Then at b7, I come back and take with the rook, keeping the bishop anchoring the pawn on c2. Winning for black. And notice that rook f7 never really does anything. I have an escape route to e5, and his rook would have to come back to c7 regardless to stop the pawn. But for simplicity's sake, I just picked off the b6 pawn, and also he was way down on time. Yeah, and I think this final position is over. If the bishop strays from its current position, like say it goes back to e8, rook a1 threatening to promote is decisive because of king d2, rook d1 check, and c1 queen. And if bishop b3, rook a3, let's say he defends the bishop somehow, take, his rook's overloaded. He was trying to defend the bishop and also defend against the c-pawn promoting. Okay, yeah, so this is a good weapon, like I said. Certainly for faster time control games, a6. I don't know that I would play this over the board. I'd probably play something more solid like e6, and I have played e6 before in this position, or g6. g6 is also good. Those of you who like, for instance, the black side of the Meraxi bind might not mind playing g6, anticipating knight c3, bishop g7, e4, and you're in a Meraxi. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this 5-minute game, and I will be back tomorrow with another 5-minute game. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you later.